Hello, hello, hello. Zeteo here, doing some more Alpha Cup casting. Today we're going to be doing, I believe it's the round of 6 between, um, sorry, who is it? It's so many things. So we're looking at Wraxell and Lopatka today. Let's jump
Game
in.
started.
All right, take out the overlay. And all right, so we got Lopatka spawned at the bottom left here as our red Cortex player. And at the top center, we have Wraxell playing as Armada as the blue pieces. So already quite a bit of difference between these different spawn locations. You know, the corner positions here are a little bit easier to defend. You know, this position, only has 3 mexes compared to the other corner position that has 4. But at the same time, it's a little bit more open. It's a little bit easier to see units coming by, especially if you control this area. You can put down a radar, see out about there. And, that certainly helps to defend against things coming along the hills where radar can't see over. So, I like this choice. It's just it's not so much of a, it's just better or it's worse type of thing, but it's just different kind of situation. But yeah, looking at Wraxell here, spawned in the center. A little bit of idle time on the commander. That's certainly a misstep. You definitely don't want that because every second that your commander's not building is 300 build power that's not being utilized, and you certainly have the resources for it this early on. Wind dip it down a little bit. Looks like he's really going to need to maybe add on some wind here in a moment. But yeah, looking back at Lopatka's base, Lopatka already adding on that wind. So we're seeing some little adjustments that Lopatka is doing. That is, pretty strong here. Wraxell here finally adding on some wins. But yeah, with the energy so low, it does get pretty challenging trying to produce those units as well as those wind turbines, as well as mexes as your con is coming out to expand. But yeah, we do see some pressure from some Wraxell first. We do see a tick. We do see some pawns. This is pretty typical when you're talking about Armada and Cortex. Cortex doesn't have a tick, and so they kind of have to be a little bit more on the defensive. But then, they can, in some cases, use their range to get some extra damage against pawns, and deal with them. So it can certainly swing into Cortex's favor if he does a good job with defending against these ticks. But yeah, it looks like Wraxell just with 1 con so far. So both players on 1 con producing units. Lopatka cranking out a lot of grunts here. Trying to use up that metal. Probably eventually adding on a con in not too long. Looks like a tick is trying to sneak along this left-hand side. Looks like, Lopatka a little bit slow to deal with that. So I think he's probably going to be losing this mex. And yeah, he's actually keeping this constructor back. That's a bigger deal than the mech. So yeah, pay attention to that if you can. Unfortunately, these grunts moving away from the tick. The tick is still alive. A couple more coming from the top left here towards Lopatka's base. Lopatka is moving some units towards Wraxell. But of course, very importantly is defending here. Desperately does not want to lose that con. It's the only one he's got. Mex gets picked off on the left. But yeah, the con is going to go down on the right, and this is a really big deal because he's going to have to replace that con. He does have another one, helping to produce some units here, but he doesn't have any metal income anymore. He's lost every single mex that he's built. He's just going to have to resurrect some. And yeah, these ticks are, this has certainly been like plenty of damage, but nothing that can't be recovered. It really comes down to the engagements here. If these grunts are able to trade favorably with the pawns, it really comes down to the micro of how that happens. Because grunts do outrange pawns, they can get some extra damage in, but you want to, keep that distance so that the pawns don't jump on you, because pawns have significant, damage per second, and so you got to be really careful about that. Another con here that is trying to move out there. Wraxell seizes the opportunity, going to be able to take that out basically for free, and Lopatka's kind of falling apart here. Losing Toon like that is huge. And even losing this mex on the side, I think Lopatka is maybe just, just being a little bit slow with the defense here. It's kind of rough. There is some damage on the other side of the map, though. Apologies, I missed some of it. You know, being so caught up in Lopatka's base here. But yeah, all these pawns jumping on the production here, or jumping on the economy here. Only 3 wind turbines remain, and it's going to be back down to 1 mex. So carefully trying to rebuild some turbines, trying to use that grunt range. Picking off these pawns, yeah, some good damage here, and he certainly needs that right now. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, Lopatka is, you know, taking out this con, taking out this extractor, and, you know, both sides are taking heavy damage. As we look at Wraxell's base, no wind in sight, so this is certainly an interesting match where both players are losing some stuff left and right. You know, kind of back at square one. You know, and you know, every unit certainly matters at this point. Pawn gets a nice kill there. But yeah, I mean, both players kind of reset. Both players more on the defensive at this point. Wraxell doesn't have too much here at his base to defend with. His commander's sitting idle again, which is definitely a big deal. Definitely needs to start like rebuilding. Sees that there's a grunt there, decides to crank out a pawn to deal with that. And yeah, things have kind of stabilized here, and there are a lot more wrecks on Lopatka's side there. But, you know, Wraxell has certainly lost a lot as well. So you gotta be really careful how he does this. His energy is quite low, so, you know, every building that you make is going to be, you know, pretty slow. Pawn, unfortunately, doesn't quite catch the grunt until the mex gets taken out. So yeah, just Wraxell's base actually in shambles here as Lopatka, you know, Lopatka now sitting on 2 mexes, so it's, you know, it doesn't, you know, obviously that's not a lot, you know, but that is definitely more than Wraxell. Well, I say that, but I actually forgot about these 2 mexes on the side here. He does still have a con out, so he's grabbing those mexes, you know, trying to build on wind, trying to fix his energy problems. Yeah, and actually, like, this mex here is probably a bit of a mistake, just needing the energy so badly, you know, knowing that he has a couple of mexes that are probably being unpowered because he doesn't have enough energy to you know, extract that metal with. So, but yeah, it looks like the game is going to stabilize here. You know, Lopatka, you know, building a lot of grunts, but still being rather defensive about it. Just trying to desperately add on some energy, only using a con to support the lab. Commander, you know, trying to build some wind turbines to get back, you know, get that energy going ASAP. Meanwhile, at Wraxell's base, now finally, or well, I shouldn't say finally, but like getting a second con out here, looking to go for those mexes. And, you know, Wraxell doesn't have a lot of energy either, so he's going to have to build, yeah, some wind turbines here. And Lopatka, though, you know, Lopatka has the bigger army, right? So, you know, I think Lopatka has the opportunity to shut down some of these mexes, you know, destroy the radar, make it more difficult for Wraxell to you know, retake this area, because he doesn't have that many units out here. Hasn't really done quite as well of a job just like rebuilding that energy infrastructure. You know, both players sitting on low energy still. And yeah, certainly could use some more wind turbines. But yeah, this is a lot of units for Wraxell to deal with. There is a tower. He's trying to get a second tower in the corner. That's not exactly what you usually want, but in this situation, definitely a good call, because he needs to defend this con. But yeah, the mexes are taken out. Wraxell is, you know, in a bit of trouble here. As this gets taken out, yeah, the towers get taken out. The con's going to be taken out. You know, and he's just kind of losing a lot of stuff. He even has this con way out here that's going to be taken out. That's rather unfortunate. You know, trying to expand, but his units are just too far away. So this con gets taken out, and Lopatka's sitting in a pretty good position. These pawns come out of nowhere over that ridge, jump on a couple of grunts. And yeah, zooming out here once again, we have a lot of units out here from Lopatka. I think Lopatka has done just, you know, a slightly better job managing, you know, that difficult situation. You know, with most of the action happening on their territory, it's a little bit easier to, you know, to set up your macro while you're microing, while you're managing those fights. Meanwhile, Wraxell has to, move his camera all the way back to base to rebuild stuff. So, was sitting a little bit idle, and I think he's paying for it. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, if you know that your opponent's rather damaged and you're rather damaged, you do want to apply pressure, but it is just so difficult, because, the defender can just look at his base and defend at the same time, whereas you have to, look at the attack and then also go back to your base, queue stuff up periodically, and it's just really easy to, forget about doing that. Yeah, a couple pawns get back here, though. Lopatka, going to take some more economic damage. And this is certainly what Wraxell needs to get back in this game. So yeah, that energy loss is certainly a big one. Yeah, and I think with the low energy there, Lopatka is going to have to do something. He tries to go in there, but there are a lot of pawns here to greet him. And he's just got to be really careful with how he does this. Oh, pawn finally gets reclaimed. Commander trying to add on some more energy here. And we do have to remember that there is a con out here expanding. They are exploiters, so they're going to be able to defend themselves pretty well, at least against small groups of pawns. And then Wraxell also does have his own con on the right hand side here, and plenty of Rex to work with at this point. So I think it's going to stabilize once again a little bit. There is this pawn down here, but again, exploiters going to be able to pick that off pretty easily. Bit of engagement here as the grunts try to jump on these pawns, but the pawn's doing a good job just closing that gap, getting in the grunt's face, and dealing that damage back. So yeah, I think it's going to stabilize here. We got a few more cons out here for Wraxell. I think he's read the situation pretty well. He has another con coming out to retake these mexes on the left-hand side. He has a resbot picking up some of the mexes, and then he also has a resbot and two cons working on the right-hand side. And then also, this third, or I guess fourth con out there as well. So lots of expanding going down. Lopatka doing kind of the same thing, actually. Just started adding on some more cons. Has 3 out here. Just trying to rebuild those mexes and, make sure he doesn't fall too far behind. But yeah, I think Lopatka is actually in a pretty good spot, once again, because of the, how well they were able to manage their economy when all that was going down. And yeah, so he's, pretty much going to be able to keep some aggression on Wraxell. And so the pressure's on, is he able to defend these cons? There is a group of 4 grunts coming down the line on the left, or on the right-hand side. Couple of cons might get caught. He sees it on radar, starts moving the cons back, and he's sending forces over there to defend. Hopefully the LLTs will help keep him in this game, because if he loses those mexes, that's certainly going to be pretty rough. Now that I see this right or left hand side getting chewed up a little bit, it looks like he is going to come out on top, going to be able to keep his con and continue expanding, and there's even more Rex for him to work with. So if he's able to, get enough resbots out, have enough energy to resurrect with, I think he'll be in okay shape. But at the same time, Lopatka has transitioned into vehicles here. So with these incisors coming out, I think, Wraxell's in such a position where he's really going to be looking for picking up a lot of those units. He's going to be looking for trying to, continue to expand. Lopatka is a little bit more ahead at this point, and he's a little bit more ahead at this point, and it's hard for Wraxell to pressure because he's able to crank out these units. Now, incisors, they're a little bit slower. That's harder to build up a force of them, but he's had that window of opportunity, because he's been the one applying pressure to Wraxell, and now with this stronger force, I think he's going to be able to defend this off. I mean, I say that, but these grunts could actually just run around the side here. If these incisors aren't in the correct position, they can certainly do some damage. Right-hand side, incisors still doing a lot of damage as well. Looks like he's Lopatka's going to lose the con in the center, which is, it is a big deal, because now that expansion, it's going to be stopped until another con comes all the way over there. So I think Wraxell is, doing a pretty good job here. I think it's hard for incisors to be everywhere and defend all those positions, especially when pawns are running around the hills. And you know, so he's going to take a little bit of damage for it, but on, you know, with that he does have a stronger force. So we'll have to wait and see if Wraxell's able to challenge, you know, these tanks with enough pawns. Khan's doing what they can, trying to add on some more towers here. Yeah, I mean, I think these will get cleaned up, but the pawns do need to keep pursuing them. Meanwhile, on the left-hand side, there is another big incisor push here. And, you know, I'm worried that Wraxell doesn't quite have enough units out here. He's trying to resurrect what he can. He's trying to build what he can. You know, but is it going to be enough here? Yeah, there's a lot of incisors coming towards the base here. Grunt's not quite in position. And, yeah, all these units trailing behind means that these incisors are going to get some damage in here. And yeah, that's losing your whole base like that once again. Oh man, that's pretty rough here. You know, of course, again, a lot of wrecks to pick up, but you know, is it going to be too little? You know, because that is a lot of damage he just took. And then yeah, now there's these pawns in a good position here. And you know, one thing I want to mention too is just that, you know, incisors are beefier units, and so like once you leave Rex with them, you're giving them those big units to work with. So you know, if Wraxell is able to pick up a lot of these units, he does have, I think, 5 res bots out in total. You know, I think, and if he's able to produce maybe even a little bit more, he can certainly pick up that army pretty quickly. But you know, also needs to be careful with, you know, he needs to make sure that he's building enough units to meet the next attack as well. So, you know, certainly a lot of pressure on Wraxell at this point. Lopatka even adding on some anti-air bots, you know, just as a just-in-case kind of measure. And then also, you know, building a second lab here, producing some res bots of their own. And, you know, just going to be able to pick up some of these wrecks. And so, yeah, the next attack that happens, like once... Or if Lopatka's able to get back over there, you know, and do another big attack like that, you know, Lopatka has the opportunity now to also, you know, to produce tanks as well as res bots, and those res bots can go, you know, follow the army and start resurrecting, start reclaiming those wrecks that were left, you know, and within Wraxell's base. So we'll see if that happens. But yeah, another engagement here. Incisors a little bit too balled up. Ideally, you want, you know, a line of them. I mean, ideally, you want like a bit of a concave, and you want it to be facing like a point of the army so that a lot of these back units aren't attacking. A very important concept to understand overall when it comes to, you know, the micro of units. Small pawn coming over here, but, well, I guess he's just going to sit behind the constructor and not take damage from the exploiter. So that's kind of unfortunate. He's probably going to lose at least one of those cons. Second pawn actually joins the fight, but it just gets picked off by the exploiter. But yeah, one con manages to live. Okay, slow down a little bit again. So, you know, lots of tanks coming out of here from Lopatka. You know, and the resurrected army is only going to last so long. You know, eventually the metal difference in income is going to catch up with him. So he's got to make something happen here. Decides to send some forces along the side, prevents the expansion down the center. And yeah, just like keeping the majority of the units, you know, over here, because that's where that's where Wraxell's army is. Yeah, some pretty good moves from both of our players. They just kind of start sitting more comfortably because vehicles are a little bit slower, especially if you got pounders in the mix. Kind of have to wait for them to catch up. Oh, look at those shots, though. The pounders are so good if they can get close enough to find targets. There's a big force on the right-hand side for Wraxell moving down the line. But yeah, here's a whole bunch of wrecks left right here. We'll see who sends resurrection guys over there. Small engagement in the center there. But yeah, Wraxell looking to try to challenge this right-hand side, clear it out a little bit. Meanwhile, some incisors and medium tanks get into the you know, the left-hand side here of Wraxell. Pounders are coming up, so you know, Wraxell has to be very careful how he engages that, because they certainly do a ton of damage. I mean, if he's able to jump on them right now when the units are, you know, kind of away from the Pounders, it's probably the best opportunity. All right, so here's that left-hand side. Exploiters definitely doing some work, as they do. They have a lot of hit points. It can certainly tank some damage. And yeah, so far it looks like it's basically cleaned up here at this point. But maybe he can get through. Okay, so he does get through past that exploiter, and now he can maybe pick off this con, and that is at least something for him, right? He certainly needs like little things like that to help him get back in this game. Although losing a whole bunch of forces to those exploiters certainly hurts as well. All right, so it looks like Lopatka is the one that's going to be jumping on this reclaim field for the most part. You know, Wraxell has some back here to work with, so I guess it's going to be split 50-50. And Lopatka coming in here, trying to stop this, probably trying to get the res bots. So far, targeting the Pounders, takes out the Pounder, but at what cost? There's certainly a lot of damage being dealt here. Lopatka loses all the res bots, and Wraxell has done a better job keeping them alive. Now, there is this attack on the right-hand side, medium tanks getting in here. And, you know, actually, it looks like Wraxell has built some wind over there, too. So that's all, like, being threatened right now. And he doesn't have enough units on that side to deal with it. So, you know, I think this is all going to be going down on that side. You know, meanwhile, he's pressuring this, making sure... Oh, some D-guns go down. Explosions on some converters there. But yeah, he's going to be losing all those wind turbines on that right side. But he is in control of the reclaim field right here. So, you know, going to have a bit of a force for it. You know, but at the same time, does it really matter? You know, Lopatka has so much economy going for him that, you know, all the units that are picked up, Lopatka can still match. At least so far, it's matching pretty well. You know, so timing is everything. You know, how fast can you produce units versus how fast are they getting picked up? You know, and then how much is coming out of the base here? You know, because Wraxell does not have the greatest economy right now. You know, especially after losing all those wind turbines, that certainly hurts. And now this is getting a little dangerous for Wraxell on the front here. I think the timing was maybe a little too soon here. Or maybe, you know, he needed to like split off his forces to some other locations, because, you know, Lopatka's production here is just too strong. And yeah, just committing all these forces here, he's certainly going to lose this wreck field as these res bots come out for Lopatka. Yeah, trying to get his res bots over there, but yeah, he didn't even clear the army, so this is pretty rough. He loses all the res bots. And yeah, I think Wraxell's in a lot of trouble here. Well, Lopatka's building an air lab here, looking to produce some bombers, lay down some pressure in a different way. I don't know if you guys watched my last one, but I was talking about how, you know, doing ground and air means your opponent has to deal with ground and air. You know, so it becomes really challenging. And if you're already ahead, you know, air can certainly be a good way to, you know, make the gap between you two bigger. Because now they have to expend, you know, they have to spend on air, and they don't have anti-air to begin with. They just have anti-ground, right? You got like light laser towers everywhere, and you know, dealing with air can be tricky. It can definitely be expensive, you know. So we'll see how this goes down. Bombers en route here. He doesn't have the greatest vision of the base here, but gonna bomb what he can see. No scout with these bombers. I mean, I find a lot of these players do not scout the bombing, or, you know, don't scout the base, you know. But in ones, it's you know, a little bit harder for players to, you know, get the anti-air up in time. Oh, I missed it. It looks like Wraxell has actually produced the T2 lab here, and this is gonna hurt. You know, I think this is just like a build order thing of you know, if your opponent goes air and you're losing on the ground, like, you just can't do T2. Like, you're just going to get overrun by these things. You know, it's just so much cost going into the lab when you desperately need to be producing enough units to defend stuff. And now with the air attack, it's just like even more things to deal with. But Jaguars do have anti-air, so I think the bombers are pretty much cleared up at this point. But yeah, this is going to mean that these shurikens are probably going to stay back at home. Okay, so Wraxell calls it, loses his, basically just losing the entire time. Trying to claw back, did a pretty good job of it, but just at the end of the day, just proved to be too much. Whoops. But yeah, let's get in and find our second game here. All right. But yeah, I really like the air move as I'm already winning. I can afford to do air, and I have enough ground units to defend. So me pressuring you with air is just like a whole nother thing for you to worry about and to spend on. And it can be really, difficult. But yeah, we're just loading up our next match here. This is a best of 3, so we'll see how this goes.
Game started.
All right, so we got Lopatka spawned at the bottom right as our red Cortex player. And then we have Wraxell spawned at the top left as our blue Armada player. So classic colors. And I do want to talk about the spawn locations a little bit too. So Lopatka has spawned on this hill here, which is also in a corner, so it's a much more defensible early on. You only have, you got 2 ramps to worry about for defense, and units moving up those ramps are going to be a little bit slowed down, right? So a little bit more of a defensive location. There's only 2 ways into your base. Meanwhile, Wraxell's position here is a little bit more forward. If he puts on a radar, it's hard to see up this hill, and so it's really easy for your opponent to perhaps go up the hill this way and swing around to your base, branching out into, wherever locations. So, there's something to think about. Same thing with the left-hand side here. It's a little bit more open for that as well. So where you put the radar can become very, very important. It's a little bit harder to defend this location, but it is a little bit easier to walk to the center with your commander and start sectioning off certain things. So in the long run, it can be a strong move, but you have to be very careful with how you defend. But taking a look at what Lopatka's doing, he's opening a vehicle lab here, which I usually, I see a lot of bot openers on this map, but vehicles are certainly something you can do. Bots, in a way, because it's you want to expand a lot on this map. It's a little bit more of a macro map, just because the sheer size of it, and then the center's automatically blocked off because of these lakes here. So that means your opponent has to go a little bit further out of their way to get to your base. But yeah, first con out here for Wraxell. Mostly pawns, it looks like. A couple of ticks just to scout. Hasn't, seen any scouts from the opposition, so probably feels pretty comfortable with these pawns coming out. Wraxell finally producing that first con. Actually goes for construction turret here. I think that's a bit of a well, I mean, it's a good play overall, but you got to be really careful with the defense, because you need to have enough units out to defend this constructor, and if you don't, you're going to lose it, and that's going to feel awful, especially if you just dropped a whole bunch of money on that construction turret. But yeah, so far not a lot of aggression, so looks like he's going to get away with it essentially, as he starts moving that constructor over. Commander already leaving the base. That's kind of what this construction turret allows you to do. You have a substantial amount of build power, dedicated to your factory. So now you don't need your commander there as much, and you can kind of walk your commander out a little bit sooner. Meanwhile, on Wraxell's side, still just chilling with one constructor out. Commander just boosting some pawns, and so he's looking to do some early damage. But I think this map's a little bit too big for that. I think, I think Lopatka is going to be sitting pretty good with that. I mean, I say that, but at the same time, he is vehicle too, so it's kind of hard to get up enough incisors to be at all these different locations that are being pressured by these bots. Unfortunately, these takes a little bit idle, especially this one here. Could have potentially threatened this a little bit, but I guess he's paying a little bit more attention to the pawns since they're more valuable. But yeah, those pawns get picked off as well. So yeah, if he doesn't do something though, if he doesn't take out this constructor, or at least do some like economic damage to the main base here, you know, Lopatka's certainly going to be in a better position for it. You know, Wraxell trying to do this like heavier aggression, and if he doesn't get anything done, it's just gonna, you know, he's just gonna be really behind for it. These constructors have so much hit points, so, you know, giving ample time. Oh, okay. I was gonna say, man, if he doesn't take that out, that's gonna, whew, that's close. That's real close. But yeah, just sticking with the one constructor for now. You know, again, the commander's out expanding already, so there's that as well. Wraxell actually is sticking him one con as well. I definitely would have expected him to produce some more in this time. But I guess not. Oof. Alright, well, Wraxell has been dealing some damage here. You know, he did come back, kill the constructor, killed a couple of mexes. You know, it's now threatening the energy infrastructure here. Pawn's on the you know, up here as well, taking out a mex, taking out an incisor. A little bit of economic damage, perhaps. There goes one. Man, if only he had stayed on that solar collector, that would have been a pretty big, you know, thing to get. Oh, incisor a little bit stuck on that hill. Oh, his next constructor coming out here is threatened, though. These incisors trying to get up the hill are slowed down. This is definitely a rough defense here, as the constructor gets picked off. It's certainly putting Wraxell in a little bit better of a position now. You know, again, he's still only on one con. Actually, just now produced a second one, and isn't quite out expanding yet. And yeah, I think, you know, just against vehicles, like, pressure is pretty strong, I guess. You know. And in some way, like, abusing the hill, make, you know, the incisors that are more forward have such a hard time getting back up that hill, you know, to defend this location. So, you know, these pawns are just going to be a little bit more, you know, more capable of getting in here. You know, so you know, if you're going to do vehicle on this map, I would say, yeah, this is the spot to do it. But you also need to, like, maybe block it off a little bit more. Or just be more, you know, more, aware of, like, where the pawns are, like, you know, having a radar out here at this time, like, for sure. You know, having a radar not until all the way up here feels pretty bad. You know, you don't know that these pawns are coming in here, you know, so you kind of just have to have extra units over there, even if you don't want them. But yeah, it looks like he's gonna, okay, yeah, his constructor there is gonna live this time, at least for now. But yeah, let's take a look at what Wraxell is doing for expansions. 2 cons are out. Couple more at the base, or one's being built, one's adding on some wind here. Energy is a little bit low, but I assume he's going to be correcting that in a moment. Metal income's basically the same, you know. So after all that, after all those, you know, constructors being lost, it's basically just evened out. Yeah, so you know, Lopatka losing those constructors, but I mean, if you lose those constructors and your opponent never builds them, you know, then it's basically even, you know. And then at the same time, you know, they do leave Rex too. I mean, he doesn't have res bots right now, but, like, you know, he could either, I mean, you could technically wait to pick him up till later, but you might as well just, like, reclaim it, get a little bit of metal back, you know, if you need it. And yeah, this game's basically stabilized here. And, you know, there's, you know, yeah, the game's stabilized here, and there's plenty of incisors out now at this point. You know, all these clusters of mexes are probably pretty well protected. I would assume there'd be some LTs here. Yeah, some coming up at the top here. So yeah, so far it looks like Lopatka basically sectioning this off here. Well, I say that, but actually you need to do this too, because pawns can run up that little ridge there. And then, you know, defending there and sending units out this way, right? You know, so basically all he has to really worry about is this bottom portion of the map in terms of units, assuming that he, you know, makes enough towers here to defend. Yeah, so it's a style where it's like, you know, you're you know, closing it off so that's hard for your opponent to attack there, and then you just go elsewhere. You know, that way you can cluster up a lot more tanks together, you know, to do more damage. Yeah, a bit of a split here with the incisors. but not as much of a split with the pawns. So these incisors on the right here are going to be doing some have done some good damage here. Incisors on the left trying to do what they can too, but the pawns intervene. Incisors doing a great job backing up, by the way. Just back up, make the pawns, have to chase you, and that's just like always better, better for your army to be retreating in a way. But yeah, this is a very sizable incisor force here if you put them all together. And Wraxell doesn't really have the pawns out to deal with this. Still has a bit of a bank of metal. I mean, I suppose both players do. And yeah, just like, need to add on build power and more energy, but it's really hard to when you got so much pressure on you. So many things that are, kind of more important at the moment. What I like to always say is pay attention to the big macro stuff first, like your big base building stuff first. That's the most important thing, that you have, the big overall sense of what you're doing down. Then micro becomes very important. Take a look at all those different, like how you move your units and stuff like that. But more important is the big picture of where you're moving them. Are you defending? Not little tiny micro tricks, but just how you're moving your army around, right? And as you get comfortable with that, then you can do more. You can micro your macro. You can pay more attention to the little details of the macro. Fixing your economy just right, so you're not overproducing energy. You're not, you're making sure that you're, storing stuff up. You're converting what you have excess of, and stuff like that. And then pay attention to the little tiny details of micro of, oh, this pawn's hurt, let's move him back. I'll get him repaired. That stuff's it's still important, but it's not as important as other things. But yeah, that was my little tangent for the moment. Well, let's look back at this game and what's going on here. Not a lot has really changed here. Both players just kind of gearing up, grabbing, just building more units, building more energy. Wraxell feeling Lopatka a little bit low on energy here. Kind of needs to build some solar. It is a map where solar's, having more solar is kind of okay because the wind is a bit lower. Wraxell here, energy is good, but definitely could use some more metal. So, we see the differences at the top right here. But yeah, Lopatka certainly has more expansions at this point, and I think it just had to do with, once you get those tanks out, you're the one that's doing the pressure, because you have such a big ball of strength that you can just kind of shove somewhere, and doing that, the bits of damage that he's done has certainly helped him out as well. But yeah, Wraxell trying to rebuild still. Yeah, these just get taken out. It looks like well, actually, this is going to be threatening this frontal position here. Yeah, so these cons out in the front are probably going to go down in the moments here. I remember the main stage was looking for games to watch. Okay, Lopatka's moving his army, or moving his commander into the water there. I wonder if he's going to be building any tides there. Tides aren't super good on this map, but it's nice to have that consistency. They're certainly better than solar, but just not better than than wind on average. Pawns coming in here trying to take this out, but man, are these exploiters are so tanky. It almost survives. But now this con is going to be threatened here in a moment. Pawns coming up the right-hand side here. Pawns and resurrected tank. And yeah, this position isn't, it's fortified, but it's not fortified for this amount of units here. So yeah, Lopatka's going to have to send some units over to defend that. Losing these solars is kind of a big deal for him right now, as he really needs that energy. And okay, so yeah, Lopatka making some tides in there. Yeah, he really needs to get that sorted out, because he certainly needs more energy to be able to defend against all this. Once again, it's you got only so many tanks to deal with. It's really easy for the bot player to be in more places at once for it. And yeah, I mean, tides are only okay here. 15's not really that strong, and they cost basically like twice a wind turbine. So, on average, 10 is kind of be better than like 7.5 if we cut the tide costs in half. Yeah, that's as a rule of thumb. It's not exact, it's not exact science, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, just lots of stuff coming out here. We've seen Air Lab here for Wraxell starting to produce some Banshees. I wonder if he's going to be going for a snipe with this, or if he's going to try to just like pick off, advancing units, or if he's going to try to pick off some of the infrastructure here from Lopatka. And then, yeah, obviously we'll have to wait and see what Lopatka does as a defense. Nice forward radar here from Lopatka. I'd certainly like, seeing a lot more that, generally speaking, you don't oftentimes get a position like that. So that should help him see actually these Banshees a little bit ahead of time. So he should know that it's around about now. I don't see an air lab or anything quite yet. There is a sizable amount of units here from Wraxell coming down on this left-hand side. And I don't see I don't see anything defending there. So these Banshees trying to, they did a little bit of damage to this army, but I don't think they don't deal enough damage to truly they're not going to be able to take this out. So looking how it's going, this looks like it's going to be a base trade. Now we got a sizable force coming up here from Lopatka. Looks like Wraxell moving his commander into position for some D-guns potentially. And yeah, you can, get a lot of good D-guns here. But yeah, you do have to be careful because this is so many incisors. Commander doing a pretty good job. They're actually going to jump on the commander though. Meanwhile, Lopatka's base also going to be in trouble here. Commander's not there though, so yeah, Wraxell cleaning it up pretty convincingly. Meanwhile, over here, yeah, his base is certainly taking a lot of damage, and yeah, with his commander not able to help defend it, it's just what can he do about it? You're like trying to just produce enough units to defend against such a gigantic force coming your way. It's certainly very tricky. And then meanwhile, with all these Banshees going after those mexes on the side, Wraxell has certainly put this game into his favor. With those D-guns, like just having your commander in a good spot. Lopatka not quite paying attention to his army up there, more worried about his base perhaps. Yeah, Lopatka's just like in a lot of trouble now. This is fairly GG at this point. Wraxell is able to produce quite a bit more units now because of that. Just has more resources for it. Lopatka's resources are going to be drying up a little bit here. Yeah, in fact, Wraxell could even like keep producing out of that air lab, or make another lab for like vehicles or something like that, or maybe another bot lab, because he's actually not able to spend what he has. Resbots kind of in trouble, but it looks like they're pulled away. Rebuilding and like getting the game back under control for Lopatka. These Resbots are certainly going to help out with that, so it's very important that he keeps them alive. And yeah, there's still a lot of units here. They do stream into the commander a little bit, and he's going to be really careful because he doesn't have the energy to D-gun. So this is kind of he's like for sure going to get killed off here once enough pawns accumulate. In fact, like if I was him, I would be probably retreated my commander, but maybe that's a tell to show that like I really don't have energy. But at the same time, he should already know that Lopatka doesn't have energy because his base is leveled. Just nothing here. All right, so he's jumping on the commander now, and yeah, that's like way too much considering there's no D-guns. And yeah, that's GG right there.
Battle ended.
Wraxell takes the win. So it's all tied up 1-1. We have a third game for this one. So let's get that loaded up. Yeah, that was a really strong showing from both these players here. And then yeah, just like having your commander out of position, like yeah, it should move forward, it should do stuff, you know. But then having it at the base is maybe like useful too, you know. All right, so we got our third game loaded up here. Up.
Game
started. I uncovered it a little bit too early here. But anyways, we have Lopatka spawned as our red Cortex player at the bottom left. On the hill at the bottom left. Wraxell spawned at the top right as our blue Armada player on the hill once again. So these are identical positions. The map is Cyrilata, and you know, it's rotationally symmetric, so they are in like the same position, which is the position that I prefer for this map. Some people, you know, like spawning on the other side of things. Yeah, this must have been a casted match. But yeah, let's see. Wraxell getting that bot lab. Lopatka also... Actually, no, Lopatka's doing a vehicle lab here. You know, typically I see a lot of bot openers and then into vehicle as you grow your economy. Mexes here are quite large. 2.2s are pretty big. You know, so like being able to just... Whoops, that's a weird... Why is it? Oh, because I have that selected. Okay. So being able to expand, grab these mexes here, expand here, grab these mexes here. And then also, like, there's this little puddle. You know, you can put an LT here and here to kind of keep all this back area alive. You know, it's pretty easy to build up some pretty early starting metal. And then, yeah, from there, like, that's enough to, like, afford a pretty substantial army on its own. And then grabbing all the other mexes, you know, in some direction. Is really strong. There's also a 5.0 mex here in the center, and so playing for the center can be a big deal because not only does it have that big mex, it also is a strong position to play out of. You know, if you're able to set up defenses and put down some production there, you know, then it becomes really easy to kind of just section off your opponent here. It's really hard, you know, because your opponent would basically need to send units all the way around, right? And that gives so much opportunity to have just a really fast counterattack. So yeah, really strong position to have in that center spot. Yeah, I would say it's more important, but oftentimes on this map, you know, the center is open enough that it's difficult to like truly set up there. Looks like Lopatka going to be doing just that though. Looks like he's geared up to take this location, take that mex there, and then go straight for the center with his commander. So. You know, that is his game plan at the moment. Wraxell not setting up any of that quite yet, just has his commander boosting out a lot of pawns here. So Wraxell here going to be laying down the pressure on this map, you know, with Lopatka going tank. So yeah, this is going to be a little bit more difficult for Lopatka in some sense because of that, or at least at this early stage, until they're able to produce enough tanks to you know, fend it all off and then, you know, eventually go attack. Especially since you know, Wraxell has, you know, made less constructors than I think a lot of people would. Yeah, I mean, I guess he does have 2 out here now, but yeah, keeping your commander at your base, you know, oftentimes is a sign that you're trying to produce a lot of units. Yeah, I mean, my typical opener on this map has to do with the consort. You know, get some early consorts, start expanding. Kind of what Lopatka's doing, but I usually open bots. You know, I like that kind of play where you're able to just crank out a lot of units. You know, as long as you defend that very early game, and you're able to get that constructor or, you know, consort out, then you can really start applying a lot of pressure directly after that. But yeah, so far Wraxell. Just chilling with his commander, not adding on any additional build power at his base quite yet. Okay, so this Khan is threatened here on this left-hand side. Going to be taken out, and that certainly hurts a heck of a lot. That's the only constructor expanding. He does have a backup here. Yeah, he's got to be really careful. Yeah, these tanks can be caught out of position pretty easily. And if you're not like paying attention to it, sharking around with your tanks, making sure that they're moving so that the you know, they don't have to take time, you know, accelerating to their max speed. You know, that all can certainly help out a little bit. Yeah, if you don't do that, like, it's really easy for your tanks to just, like, you know, like, you see something moving towards a position, and you're like, oh shoot, I need to move my tanks, and they're like slowly accelerating, then they finally start going, and then the pawns are already past you, and it's like, oh shit. But yeah, only one con out here again for Lopatka, or it's still for Lopatka. It does have a commander out trying to do what it can, but right now he's not grabbing mexes. You know, this whole area here doesn't really have a lot of mexes, so, or it doesn't, you know, only has the one mex really. So, you know, they might fall a little bit behind on metal income for this. You know, since there is just that one grabbing mexes. In fact, a little bit threatened here. Yeah, Lopatka trying to get his tanks into position, but yeah, they're just slowly like turning around and trying to get to where they need to be. These pawns trying to find a good angle, and yeah, look at this. These tanks trying to do what they can, but these ticks still get in here. You know, he's got to worry about the aggression towards the commander. Got to worry about the ticks there. Then also has to worry about these pawns on the right hand side, and you know, it's kind of a lot to think about. But yeah, meanwhile, Wraxell has, you know, 2 cons out here now. You know, and still has his commander at home, pumping stuff out. In fact, should be building more energy. There he goes as the wind dips down a bit. But yeah, it stabilized a little bit. You know, I think right now is like when we're starting to see that you know, the tables turn, where the vehicle player is starting to get that momentum, starting to have enough tanks out to like put them, you know, to start attacking with them. So, you know, we'll see if Wraxell is able to defend against these tanks. Looks like, you know, these are just going to get picked off, unfortunately, not paying attention to them. Plenty of pawns here for defense as they get stuck on that wreck. 3 more come up here, but I think this is, yeah, after those 3 already went down, like, he kind of needed those to be together instead of separate. So unfortunately, you know, that push is totally going to be taken out. There's a small engagement here at the bottom. Looks like Lopatka's con here is, again, threatened, going to be taken out, and the mex is taken out as well. So, you know, definitely a very tricky situation. Like, Lopatka trying to, like, section this area off so that the attacks stop coming down there. But these pawns get into his base. You know, this is more infrastructure damage. He's apparently this con is going to live, but, you know, all the winds going down, that's such a big deal. Okay, con is going to go down, and now these pawns are still alive. You know, it's just so annoying for vehicles to go up this ramp. You know, and that's why I would say, you know, opening with bots here is just so much. It's just so useful. You know, if you're up against someone of Wraxell's caliber, able to run around to all these different locations, it becomes a nightmare when you got tanks, you know, that are trying to like turn around and go up the hills and whatnot. So I think this is a bit of a better opener here from Wraxell. And Lopatka just calls it. All right, well, that's our game. Kind of a nice, short, sweet one. But, you know, just like
Battle
a tactical,
ended.
well, not even a tactical takedown, just a, you know, build order win in a way. Just like, well, you went vehicle, and the terrain's not great for vehicle early on, so I'm going to abuse that. Anyways, that wraps it up for this cast. I hope you guys learned something as I try to have a much more analytical take on things. And yeah, I'll be continuing to do the rest of the Alpha Cup. So stay tuned for more of these casts. Thanks for watching.